Hey everybody, Reef Girl here. In this video, let's take a look at water management for the new Red Sea Reefer XL 425 build. This rack is being built to hold two polyethylene totes, which each hold 27.5 gallons. The upper tote will hold RODI water, and the lower tote will hold salt water. This will be pumped upstairs so that we can supply the ATO and do water changes. In what turned out to be leak test number 1, we learned that a couple of the bulkheads did have leaks, so there was really severe dripping from this one, and another one had a little bit of a seep. The second thing we learned is that the sides of the totes bulge out when there's a lot of water in them, and the problem with that is it puts pressure on the bulkheads and the plumbing, and the hard plumbing that needs to be vertical was getting bent out of shape. So we did some research and learned a little bit about bulkheads and what we had done wrong. This is a standard bulkhead with a slip fitting, and it includes a washer and a nut. So let's see how it's done. We need sandpaper and some silicone. The first thing to note is that silicone won't stick to a shiny surface. And you can see here that the surface of the plastic bulkhead is very shiny. So we take our fine grained sandpaper and just sand around that surface, anywhere that we're going to put silicone. And it might take a few minutes to get everything done, but when you're finished, you can see that you've roughed it up, it's not shiny anymore. It's also a good idea to take some sandpaper and sand the edges of the hole on the inside and the outside, just to add a little bit of extra grip. Next up is to apply silicone completely around that sanded surface so you have a good, healthy bead. Then, take the bulkhead and insert it from the outside of the container towards the inside. And then when you look at the washer, you can see something we learned from a plumber. One side is smooth and shiny, the opposite side has some ridges on it. And those ridges are what goes against the wall of the container. We had it in backwards before, and that was our problem. So once you put the nut on and spin it on just finger tight, don't use a wrench because that could distort the washer. Leaving it that way, the silicone will probably squeeze into any gaps that there might be. And once you have it tightened well enough, then just leave it overnight to set, and you should be good to go. So here's the second leak test, and thank goodness there were no leaks. After solving that issue with the bulkheads, we can move forward. So after the second leak test was successful, everything has all been reconnected, the totes are in place, and that white pipe there is the transfer from the RODI container down to the saltwater mix container. Up here are the hoses. They come out of the two totes. The one you see here from the top will supply the ATO upstairs, and the bottom one will supply the salt water for water changes. Here in the upper tote is the float switch that came with the SpectraPure 5-stage RODI system that we bought. And here at the back is the just-in-case drain line. It's set up to overflow in case the float switch should ever get stuck open, and it'll drain right down into the laundry sink. So to get the RODI water from the top tote down into the bottom tote for salt mixing, we have this hard plumbing with a valve. Gravity will do the trick, open the valve, and the water will drain straight down. And around here on the front are two manual taps with hoses attached. These aren't copper, that's actually just plastic. These are here so that if I need water for any other purpose that I don't need pumped, I can just remove it manually. Around the back, we have the controller cables that are hooked to the pumps that are in each tote. And they'll be connected to these cables, which are the ones that run upstairs where the controllers are. You might remember that during the leak test we learned that the sides of the totes bulge outwards when there's water inside. So to prevent pressure on the plumbing, these wooden brackets were built to hold the sides of the totes in place so that they wouldn't move. There's a set up here and a set on the lower tote as well. And this plumbing is just fine. the addition of these two supports did the trick. One final thing, what you see there is the label from the outside of the original shipping crate. It has the name and the serial number on it. These shelves were made using that crate, and I'm really happy that we didn't waste it. We found a really good use for it. Yep, just like happened to Steve Roder in his video about his RODI unit breaking and leaking, which shout out to him, because if I had not watched that video, I would not have known what this was about. But we contacted the vendor right away, and he was able to send another fitting, put that in, and it works perfectly. So here's a tip. You can see that black hose that supplies the RODI unit, and that comes from our water supply that comes into the house. We freaked out a bit because we noticed it was wet, and we thought, oh man, not another leak. But it isn't a leak, it's just condensation. And with the summer coming up, things will get more humid and we will get more condensation. So we've set it up so that the low point of the hose is actually over the sink, and any drips that we get should go down there. Now that the RODI unit is working properly, we can make RODI water so that we can fill up this container and calibrate the sight glass that's on the front. This is the only way I'll really know how much water is in here. So as we pour it in 1 gallon at a time, we mark on that piece of tape what level we're at. The first amount of water that actually showed up in the sight glass, because it's up a little bit from the bottom, was 6 gallons. And we're about halfway through. So the RODI container is full, and now we're testing whether this pipe leaks where the water goes down from the upper container into the lower container. Turn the valve and it's just fine. So after all that work, it's finally time to test some pumps. First up is the salt water coming up from the basement. We have the controller plugged into a power bar, and over here is a tote with a couple of hoses clamped on. So now let's flip the switch. Controller comes on full, and let's see.
It works!
And now we can test the drain. We have this Cobalt EXT inline pump, and the outflow is hooked to the drain line. This drain line travels along the floor behind this piece of baseboard here, and that leads into the closet and down to the basement. So we turned on the pump, and you can see there's water in the hose, so that is working perfectly. And here's where the hose from upstairs goes into the main drain, down to the sink, no leaks. And finally, the test for RODI from the basement. Here it comes, and there's the water. Success! So I'll leave you with a look at some of the work in progress as we went along. The aquarium cabinet being used as a workbench. I wasn't too thrilled about this, but it was unavoidable. I'll give you a sneak peek into some of the equipment that I've got that I'll be using. There's my AP700. And the next video to come out will be about power management, and this is where some of the really unique ideas will be showcased, and I think that will be very, very interesting. Thanks so much for watching. I've really enjoyed the process of this whole build up to this point, even though I'm dying to get the rocks and the sand and the water in the tank. All the time that we've put in getting ready and getting to this point is just going to make it much, much easier for me, and it'll allow me to really enjoy this hobby to its fullest.